Bring that ass to me.
Hey.
If there is any kind of film that has the nasty habit of feeling aimless and uninspired, it's live-action movies based on video games. There's various reasons behind this. Maybe the writers and directors don't have the slightest understanding of what makes the source material special, maybe they try too hard to appease fans of the game in strange ways, or maybe what they were making shouldn't even exist in the first place.
I discovered the House of the Dead machine for the first time, and I'm like, it was a horror movie come to life, and the only difference is you weren't sitting in the audience, you actually got a chance to kill zombies, and I thought this would make a great movie.
How the hell did you come to that conclusion? A perfect testament to how video games and their stories typically don't meld into a film. It's a different medium. The story and presentation, even for a simple one like House of the Dead, is taking advantage of being in that medium. But is it even fair to say that a video game adaptation is an instant disaster? Not really, but it's undoubtedly what most people think, especially movie critics. Also, very few of these projects are ever met with a shred of creativity, resulting in little more than junk films, although I think some are starting to show a mix of ambition and effort to be true to the material, or at least a semblance of giving a shit. If only the Resident Evil movies weren't so popular. Your next Monster Hunter. Back to Dead Rising films. I've previously covered Zombrecht's Dead Rising Son in my old retrospective series very briefly. If you don't already know, the movie is a must-watch for all the wrong reasons, but make sure it's the English dub. It isn't very hard to find online.
We'll definitely leave in the morning, and we won't touch a single thing in the place, huh?
Yeah? Weren't you talking about food?
In recent years, some Western films based on the series have been made. Did they go against the typical outcome and create movies that were either faithful to the source material, have a unique vision, or both? Neither? Well, this is one of the most quickly forgotten film duos ever, so what does that tell you? The original Dead Rising game wears its inspiration on its sleeve, having its main premise be in a shopping mall, just like one of the most popular zombie films of all time. So, can the story of a journalist going on his own in the dead center of an outbreak be adapted into a film? While the first movie does serve a premise similar to that, neither take place in a shopping mall. These are more like side stories that occur between the mainline titles, which in my opinion is the best way to go about creating a film based on a video game. Speaking more on that, there's elements that these movies can focus on without being a straight-up retelling of the story within the games, such as the idea of a protagonist catching a big story or scoop that'll help them and the audience understand what's happening with this zombie outbreak, big venues heavily crowded with said infected, the concept of the characters using whatever they can grab as weapons, and in that same breath, combo weapons, some kind of ace to help them, maybe queen wasps, human protagonists that bear a tragic scenario which shatter the minds who now pose as a large threat to the people around them, heavily modified vehicles to help them in their toughest situations, and the impulse of changing clothes. I know it sounds dry laying them out this way, but to me, these are the most significant aspects that made the original Dead Rising games stand out as video game experiences, more or less. I did want to cover Dead Rising Watchtower back when it was new, but watching it was such a bore with little substance, I didn't really see anything I could discuss. However, a sequel released in 2016, gotta be honest, it didn't help much. Still, let's see what we've got. Here we have our main character, Chase Carter, played by Jesse McAuliffe. McAuliffe? He was in a bunch of crap. Not Frank West, we'll get into that. Wow, look at that Surfbot shirt. This movie is good. He starts chucking random items against these threats, which might be considered an homage to the games, but I don't know, it isn't wholly unique to begin with for zombie movies. In fact, nothing this movie does is really that unique. The majority of Watchtower is just a series of plum-picked moments that feel like shallow imitations of scenes from better zombie films. How many times do we need to see fake news footage for the introduction, or the dreaded car won't start scenario? Or anarchist assholes trying to take advantage of outbreaks, or watching some bystander beg for mercy from said assholes just to get screwed over and chomped, or scenes of corrupt government dialogue, or a scene of a character playing the video game this movie is based off of in the movie. Okay, that's more of a problem with video game adaptations than horror films, but I hate this shit anyway. It's distracting and all it achieves is taking the audience out of the film entirely. I'm not saying these scenes are objectively worthless for any movie, except that last one. Just that these now tired concepts were done by the best of the best, so it comes off as heaps of nothing when your cheap-ass straight-to-terrible streaming service movie is trying to do the same shit. Throwing them into a video game for the first time is what's interesting to me, such as, well, Dead Rising. The game itself plays on some of these ideas right from the very beginning. You are put into the perspective of a journalist taking photos for the sake of a scoop. You aren't just watching clips of the news because you are the news. This point is even further driven in the loading screen showing newspaper clippings that feature the photos you took. This is something I wish I talked about when I made those old videos like 100 years ago. This introduction was brilliant and such a perfect example of how video games can be unique as a storytelling medium. Anyway, back to this crappy movie. Dead Rising Watchtower has basically nothing to offer as a unique film. One aspect I would say I haven't really seen before would be them making combo weapons, probably the least embarrassing homage to the series, but who knows, maybe a zombie film I haven't seen has done it before already. Meanwhile, you got the vaccine known as Zombrex, which was a name I never really liked, but now set in the context of a forcibly grounded live-action movie, it sounds stupider than ever. Imagine if the creators of cures or suppressants called them AIDS-Rex or Diabetrex. There's also a firebomb.
This country is and will remain safe. I expect firebombing to commence within 48 hours.
And what if that rescue fails? Huh? Everything else has gone wrong so far.
Firebombing. It's the only way to get rid of them.
Wow, how inspired. Generally speaking, this movie bears the same issue I have with most that are based on video games. It takes itself too seriously and doesn't try to have fun with the idea at all, even when the source material is supposed to be goofy and charming at times. I prefer something like the Super Mario Bros. Movie because, as dumb as that film is, it's wildly entertaining for the most part and visually interesting from beginning to end. Some of the liberties that movie took to be an homage to the games are kind of fun too. I guess we'll eventually see how it stacks against the Illumination animation movie. But enough of me avoiding the topic at hand, that's barely worth summarizing. I'm just going to assume this is a lame homage to Day of the Dead. You know, forget that Dead Rising has its own kinds of zombies, just take ones from other movies instead. Fine. Yeah, in case you're wondering, the whole Santa Cabeza incident nor the concept of wasps are present in the movie at all. There's one more connection to the original games we haven't brought up yet. Of course, you can't have a Dead Rising movie without Frank West. So they injected him into scenes that feel as disconnected to the rest of the movie as the Sean Bean scenes in Silent Hill. Portrayed by Rob Riggle, who's a pretty funny guy and appears to be trying with the material they gave him, it's just, the material sucks.
So my zombie body count's up to about 2,500 now. Would have been more if the golf club had broken.
I'm sure that the government is working hard on a fix.
The government is working hard on not shitting their pants.
Hey, I've covered wars, you know.
Oh my god. As soon as I heard hey, I knew it was coming. Took every bit of my strength to not just shut the movie off immediately. These scenes are sandwiched between Chase's boring-ass story that already feels like it takes way too long to get anywhere, so these whack-ass Frank scenes pausing the story periodically isn't helping the pace. It probably also doesn't help that I'm having a hard time caring about the characters, so I don't care where they end up.
People are gonna get eaten, faces chewed off, hands, arms, guts ripped out. People are gonna be gnawing on each other.
That's what zombies do. Am I the only one who knows about zombies around here?
They eat people.
Usually start on the extremities, work your fingers and your hands, and you work
Okay.
your way up the arm.
All right. We'll be right back.
In the end, this film feels like the people behind it were handed a sparse checklist of elements that could be put into a Dead Rising adaptation in order to make it feel at least slightly more like the games, and they only checked like 2 of them. The rest of it just consists of crap they copied from other zombie films without even a hair's attempt at being creative or unique with what they had. It's like a straight-to-video movie from a time before the original game was even released. Of course, critics claim that fans of the game will like the movie, but it doesn't provide any enjoyment for non-fans. You know, that dumb shit they spew about every single video game film that's actually garbage and pleases no one. It's like that criticism is only spouted by people that didn't really play the games and assume that's the creator's excuse for the film being awful. A subject I can dive into, but definitely won't because it's mostly irrelevant, considering this movie actually is awful. In reality, nearly all of the homages to the games are just nonsensical and paltry. Look, she's taking photos like in the game. This movie's good now. Why do they have to use a stock noise? Buzzsaws don't make that noise in real life or even in the game they took that weapon combo from. I hope it's starting to become clear why nobody really talked about this movie at all. It's so boring and lacks any actual personality. Never mind the personality of a Dead Rising experience. The only props I can give it is that the ending isn't exactly rainbows, sunshine everywhere. About a year later, Crackle, the same shitty streaming service, released a sequel known as Dead Rising Endgame. It picks up a lot of elements left unfinished in the first film, so much that I wouldn't be surprised if this sequel was greenlit before Watchtower even released, since Endgame more or less feels like the second half of the story. Huh. Endgame? That's weird. It follows up matters such as the Zombrex chips, General Allstate, the disappearance of one of the characters by the end of the first film, but not of the other. It's really obvious that Megan Ori, who played Crystal, the implied love interest for Chase, decided not to reprise her role for the sequel, so they replaced her character entirely with Sandra, played by Marie Avger, who looks sort of like Crystal. She's even kind of dressed like Crystal, and she's even infected like Crystal. They couldn't be more transparent about the situation. Besides that, the movie is wildly different. That is to say, worse. Much worse. Wildly worse.
Who the fuck are you? I could do this all day.
I'll be honest with you. Lady boys in Bangkok drove me harder than that.
Yeah, was it something like this?
They tried to make it even more grounded in reality, which only cranked up the boredom levels. Things like zombies and combo weapons received even less attention than in the first movie. Besides that, it follows Chase on a pursuit for the truth. Again, all while being pursued by General Allstate. Until he doesn't feel like it anymore and just stops being in the movie. The actors continue to be as lukewarm as ever. There isn't much to say about their performances. They did a passable job with the material they worked with, although none of them were able to really bring any sort of charm or character to them. Rule of thumb though, if nobody is really giving a good performance, that usually means it's the director's fault. Oh, but that isn't all. Look who we have arriving at the last minute. What, you don't know who that is? It's Chuck Green, the one and only, can't you tell?
Thanks, Chuck. Are you kidding me? After what you did for my daughter? Thank you.
Wait. Who? What daughter?
The wall was built to protect the server farm.
Once we're done, we'll have Chuck extract us with his chopper. His daughter has a chip.
Oh, that daughter? Who we never see or even get a name. Her own dad doesn't even say her name. Did they really put that line in there because Chuck has a daughter in the games? Is there a removed scene about Chase helping Chuck's daughter, but they left that one line in there? Now that's being faithful to the source material. And then the movie just ends with one of the worst explosion effects I've ever seen. Just like with Watchtower, Dead Rising Endgame doesn't really have anything to please Dead Rising fans, or even people that want to watch a decent zombie action horror film. Or even a it's so bad it's fun to watch action horror film. Which is just weird to me. If you're not going to be creative with the project, at least have some fun with it. You can't please everybody with anything you make, but you could at least try to please somebody. So, what's the big takeaway from this? Is a good movie based on the world of Dead Rising impossible? It's kind of hard to say. The one compliment I'll give these films is that they didn't just try to reinterpret the Willamette or Fortune City stories. Those games and their tales benefited from being told through a video game. On top of that, they were inspired by films to begin with. Trying to convert those inspired stories into plain film would feel diluted. And the idea of making side stories based on Dead Rising isn't that interesting because at the surface, it's just another zombie movie setting. Something like BioShock, for example, could benefit from a film that's set in the city known as Rapture. Whether it takes place before or after the story of the first game, I think it's a very unique setting that could have some well-written stories take place within the game's world that feel faithful. The fan service wouldn't be too difficult to implement either, I'd imagine. Perhaps I should try reading that book sometime. But Dead Rising doesn't really have the same amount of opportunity to be a creative film that feels like it's in the world of Dead Rising uniquely. If names like Zombrex and Frank were removed from this story, there's practically nothing that weaves them into Dead Rising's world. That seems to be the biggest problem these films are facing. The least they could have done was make it even more about resourceful use of your surroundings during fights, unconventional weapons, or psychopaths with ridiculous personalities. Would these elements have given the films an automatic jump in quality? Probably not, but they would most likely have made them more entertaining. Many game franchises have potential to birth an entertaining movie that has the appeal of its source material. I just don't think Dead Rising as a world has much to offer outside of its video game realm. Thanks for watching, and go watch Zombrex Dead Rising Sun. One last thing, this video will probably get demonetized soon enough if it isn't already. YouTube really seems to have a problem with gun use and some violence, even in fictional media. So if you enjoyed this little teardown on these crappy movies, maybe check out some of my other videos. And if you would consider becoming a patron as well, it supports me and motivates me to keep making content for all of you.